Getting good information about your health online is getting harder and harder than ever. In my quest to live my best life, I found one of the best doctors in the world that's transforming health. He's the guy your biggest influencers follow, and that's because he's both a medical doctor and a pharmacologist. It's an amazing combination, and he's devoted his time to providing actionable, simple advice to radically transform your health. But a big part of that for him is using evidence based studies only. So he's dedicated himself not only to make sure you're getting the best, but also the most accurate information. I had an amazing conversation where we discussed the medical industry, and there was a ton of surprises. There really are things working against your health in the medical system, and we discussed that. But we also go into the details of stuff you need to know to prepare yourself to live a truly healthy and meaningful life. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Dr. Richard Harris. And this is our conversation so timely because I love what you're about. You're an MD, but you're also big into supplements.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an interesting area, I think, because, I remember seeing one of your stories where you were like, I'm not sure what the medical equivalent to being barred. I can't remember the word you used, but like you you took great career risks for speaking about a holistic lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Am I getting it right?
Yeah, basically, when I first came out, people were looking at me like I was crazy, looking at me like I was harming my patients, that I was doing them a disservice. And I said, wait a minute, I have a degree in pharmacology. None of y'all can even talk to me about medications. Like, I don't even want to hear it. I literally have forgotten more about meds than you have ever learned because I
Right.
learned what you learned, and it's a joke compared to what I learned.
I
So
love, like, what got me into your Instagram is that, like, you're so detailed and
mhm.
you're so, like, about being evidence based.
Right. And that supplementation can be evidence based, but there's a lot of charlatans out there as well. So people get stuck in the middle. And I really wanted to bring more of that evidence based supplementation and let people know that from my perspective, there's no difference between supplements and medication. None. From pharmacology perspective, they literally both can change, interact, modify your physiology. It's just how they go about doing it might be a little bit different.
Right. And so what's interesting to me, what I've just seen recently, okay? Are you familiar with Casey and Callie Means?
Mm-hmm.
The two doctors, they recently came with a book, Good Energy. And then, Casey recently, I believe she's on the Tucker Carlson show, and they've recently gone in front of a committee in front of the Senate, and they've had many of these food influencers. Like, are you familiar with the Food Babe?
Mm-hmm.
And they even had Jordan Peterson, whose daughter was selling an all beef, all salt diet just a few short years ago. Um, I mean, here's what I see. I see a politicization of good health. It's happening. A lot of my favorite influencers online are doctors. Dr. Mark Hyman, are you familiar with him?
Yep, I've met him.
He just recently talked about a town hall where he invited both candidates. Trump accepted. Harris did not. I just realized you guys have the same last name. Any relation?
No, no relation there. Not that I'm aware of.
Sorry, I had to ask. But and then of course that became politicized because then you read the comments and they're like, oh, so there that goes to show how much she cares about health, which obviously anyone that would know anything about the complexity of running for president would know that now's probably not a great time to just drop something like that on a candidate. But nevertheless, we're getting more and more into this situation. So like I'm going to use the Food Babe as an example. She speaks a lot of truth, but she also mixes that in with a lot of stuff that's not scientifically accurate, right? What's your take on that? Is she a net positive or a net negative?
Ooh, man, coming out the gate swinging.
Sorry, man.
That is
Hey,
a tough question. So I think that drawing attention to these issues is important, and looking
Yes.
at getting people to re-examine how they interact with their environment is important, right? But to sensationalize some of the things and draw conclusions that aren't evidence based is a problem, because then you're creating fear around things. Like one bowl of Cheerios or Fruit Loops is not going to kill you, right? You have to think about how many meals do you eat a year? 3 meals a day, 365 days a year. That's over 1,000 meals in a year. And let's say you eat 100 bowls of Fruit Loops, and that's your meal. That's 100 out of 1,000. That's less than 10%. That's not going to move the needle,
Right.
right? And so we have to be able to zoom out and think about these things from a much larger perspective. So I would say overall, she's a net negative. I think it's important to draw attention to these things, but it's also equally important to be scientifically accurate, to represent what the literature shows, and to really be able to dig in, because there's a difference between an association and causation, right? You
Yeah.
can find associations between just about anything if you
Right.
really
Like
like know
murders
how to.
go up in the summer with ice cream sales, right?
Right,
We
right,
know that the two are correlated, but does buying ice cream cause murders, right?
right. I think we would all say no, that I don't eat ice cream and then go into a murderous rage, right? Most
Right.
of the time I eat ice cream, I'm pretty happy because I'm eating it with
Right. Right.
friends, or
Of course.
there's like good memories associated with that, right? So we have to be really careful. A lot of these people draw causation from correlation and associations. I think one
Right.
of the things I'll harp on, and because you mentioned this, is you're seeing a lot of people talk about the food coloring, right? And I think that's an important conversation, but I think they're missing why that's an important conversation. I think that's important because why is food companies doing that? Why do they color their foods like that? Well, it's to make them more attractive, right? It's to make the kids want more, to eat more. We know that contrast matters, like even what color your food is, what color the plate is, how big the plate is. All of that stuff can influence what you eat and how much you eat. So I think the conversation should be around, hey, why are you making these so bright and colorful to make kids overconsume your product when we know that overconsumption of these products is harmful? I think
Right.
that's the area that we should be focusing on, and not so much on, oh my gosh, this chemical is bad and this chemical is good, and so much. You have to look at overall dietary patterns. That matters more than what an individual product that someone may or may not eat.
Right. And this could be something like government policy, right? So I completely agree with you, and it is complex because you know, okay, we can agree that generally that processing foods is safe, but there is some processing that can be done. And again, these guys like Callie Means and his sister have shown ultra processing. I've read a book. Are you familiar with Van Tulliken, Chris Van Tulliken, his book
Mm-mm.
Ultra Processed Foods?
No, I'm not.
Excellent book, and he really breaks down some fantastic science that's been done to show the link between ultra processed and its tendency to make us become obese. And we
Mm-hmm.
have seen these trends, right? America, the world is getting obese. So, and this is the problem, is there's a grain of truth to what these guys are saying, but then, I think you said something critical here, which is they're sensationalizing it, right? So we have the problem, which is social media, which favors the bold, right? So we have people that want to say what's going to get the most attraction, right? But then we've got doctors like Dr. Mark Hyman. I think he's pretty unsensationalistic, but we're starting to see this tribalization. And I'll be honest, I was shocked to see her on someone as political as Tucker Carlson, who has no background in nutrition, and so um, it was discouraging in the sense that I don't think this is an item that should be tribalized. I think this is something that should apply to not just Americans, but the world, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and I'm seeing these lines, and that's why I think people like yourself are so critical. So, like, what's been your approach? How have you I mean, maybe tell us some of your background. I mean, you're an MD,
Hmm.
but you have this keen interest in supplements.
Yeah. So by background, I'm an medical doctor. I'm an internal medicine physician, so primary care. I've worked in hospitals and in clinics. I'm also a pharmacist. So I've worked in pharmacies in the hospital. I've worked in pharmacies in the community. And then I have an MBA. So I've been an entrepreneur. I have several different businesses and
You're a smart
failed
guy.
business. I work hard, right? I work hard
That's what all
and I
smart people say. You know what dumb person? Why they say how smart they are. You know, a smart person, when they say they work hard.
right. Yeah. I work hard and I'm not afraid to fail. I would say that that's what's gotten to me where I am. But I've really had a keen interest in how do we do the best we can as far as our health? How do we maintain health? How do we age with dignity and grace? How do we keep ourselves in a place that we can do the things that we love from the time we're 18 till the time like right before we pass away? And so my interest has always been in more the preventative side of health. And then if we do have a disease, how do we mitigate that as much as possible? Whether that's through pharmacology, whether that's through supplements, whether that's through lifestyle, right? And then how do we put it all together? How do we make all of these puzzle pieces fit to help people? That's a
And what have you
long
found?
winded.
I mean, you've got a pretty solid following. I mean, and just looking at who follows you, you've got some major people, influencers, doctors. Some of my favorite scientists follow you. I think that's how I first heard of you. Just looking at it now, you've got a lot.
Yeah. I've been fortunate to meet some really awesome people in this space, like Huberman, like Max
Oh, you met
Lucado.
Huberman?
Mm-hmm.
No
Mm-hmm.
way.
Yeah, funny story. Before he started his podcast, he messaged me, or maybe I messaged him, but he used to share my stuff like before he started his podcast. And
Okay.
then I was talking to him on social media about coming onto my podcast, and then he blew up, and then I didn't hear from him for a couple years, but
Yeah.
you know there's a lot of people in this space. It's a very small space, so you tend to run together, but overall, what I've found, I would say the biggest thing I found regarding health, the most important thing regarding your health is your mindset by far. Because I could give you all the right information, I could give you the right diagnosis, I could give you the right plan. And if your mind's not in the right place to accept that and see your environment for what it is, see what you're doing that's beneficial and what you're doing that maybe not so beneficial, it doesn't matter whatsoever. I've literally told people that if you continue to do this, you will die, and not in a quick way, not in a painless way. It'll be a brutal, miserable death. And it will be not only harmful for you, you'll watch as people around you suffer because
And
of
this
your
has
health.
happened to me. Uh, how do you know a lot about rap music and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who Fat Man Scoop is?
Yep.
Yeah, he was a really close friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say this now, and I've never really talked about this publicly, but I used to talk to him a lot about his health, a
Mm-hmm.
lot. And I started moving him in the right direction. I wish, man, I wish I would have introduced him to you. You know, if it was just a month before, I bet you he would have listened to you. He listens to a lot of people I refer him to,
Mm-hmm.
and he listens to them more than he listens to me. So, and I think, the world lost. He was such an incredible guy on a lot of levels, and it's been weighing heavily on me. Exactly what you're saying. I've got to figure out ways to get people. I know a lot of people that fit that category. And so what have you done? Like, what do you think the role is? Is a role for government in this?
Absolutely. So I'm really big on behavioral economics.
Me
Nudge by
too.
Richard Thaler is like one of my favorite books. If you're into
My
that kind of
background's
stuff.
economics. That's what I went to
Oh,
school for.
really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
So
behavioral economics is fascinating. Like, how do people make decisions? And
yeah,
like,
start with
even
Kahneman and
hmm Daniel
yep.
Kahneman, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. That's a incredible book as well. It's so I think it's the government could make it either easier or harder for you to make healthy
Through
decisions
incentives.
through incentives, right? Right now, there's no incentive for you to be healthy. None. It's like all the incentives are in place for corporations to profit. Healthcare is a huge business, right? It's
Yep.
the whole system is set up for it not to be easy. Like for instance, why isn't every insurance company covering gym memberships? Right? That's
You know
something
what?
that's so simple that could have a profound impact.
Here's the craziest idea I've had. One of the most underrated professions to me is personal trainers. Imagine we subsidized personal training. They would
Hmm.
literally nip health problems in the bud. So at the cost of, say, hundreds of millions, we're preventing billions. It could very well be the best investment we could ever make, right?
Right, because you get not only do you get healthcare, a lot of them are pretty proficient in nutrition, enough to give people overall a healthy nutrition plan, and they do coaching. They work on your mindset as well. They help you
Right,
see and do things that you never thought you'd be able to do before. That's
right.
really, really powerful. I'm a huge fan of personal training and coaching in general. I
And
think.
creating collective, um, I'm a big believer in community.
Hmm.
Are you familiar with Robert Putnam? He was the
Hmm.
guy, yeah, he wrote the book Bowling Alone. And he's written some fantastic books on this subject. And this is where Peloton is really on to something. And I think we need to create this communal feeling. We do see that at gyms, but I mean, my local gym, I go in there, I work out by myself. We need to communitize good health
Hmm.
and make it a social, a social norm to want to be healthy and to want to eat healthy. And I know from my own son, he's 3 years old. You're not going to believe, I couldn't believe this kid. 3 years old. And I said, hey, I actually said, hey, we could get a treat. He's like, Dad, that's not healthy. How about we eat apples? Right?
Wow. Wow.
3 years old.
Hmm.
And, it really, and, I look on so many things. So let me tell you something as a Canadian. I remember these commercials put on by the government, and they were called Body Break. And it was this husband and wife, and they would just have these commercials on TV as a kid. And they would come on, they were called Body Break, and they would just give you these health tips. And I would go as far as to say they probably had one of the most underrated impacts on health in Canadian history because we all grew up to them and these simple messages that were constantly repeated.
Hmm.
I can't even guess to the I can't even guess to the measure of the health of that. So so you're right. So what do you think can be done? As a behavioral economist, or from that perspective, what are some incentives we can do?
So you can have punishing people and you can reward people. I think from a certain standpoint that you have to punish people for bad behavior. So if people intentionally know that it's harmful to smoke or drink sodas all day, right? Tax it. Increase
Yep.
taxes on them. Right?
Yep.
We've seen that soda taxes in the studies I've read work. People will consume less. And I'm not saying that you never drink soda or diet soda, but I'm saying if you're consuming 2 or 3 sodas a day, that's a problem. And there are many Americans who are consuming 2 or 3, not diet sodas, but regular sodas every single
And
day.
mhm. And we've seen even bad health effects even with diet sodas, right? So,
No, so I think a lot of that is association. So when you look at this is a good point about research, right? So if you look at the literature on diet soda, you see there's an association with weight gain, there's an association with adverse cardiovascular outcomes. But the reason is that most the people who drink the most diet soda are more likely to be obese, sedentary,
mm,
smokers, have poor nutritional quality, right? So I could say I could look at people who drink the most diet soda and say, "Oh my gosh, they have worse outcomes," but it's because of the behaviors that are associated with it. So what that
right.
actually means is the person who drinks the most diet soda, that's a proxy for an unhealthier lifestyle. If you
Right.
look at intervention studies where they substituted in diet soda, even against water, people lose more weight in the diet soda arm than they do even drinking water arm.
Hmm.
So what I tell people with diet sodas is if you're drinking like diet soda all day, every day, that's probably not advantageous, right? They're high in phosphorus. There is an association there with osteoporosis, and
And the
that's brittle bone
acidicness of the drink
disease.
on your teeth and stuff.
Right. And so I'll tell them if you're going to have a diet soda, have it with lunch, right? In between meals, drink water. Right. So the CDC estimates that 50% of people don't intake enough water per day. And even though soda is mostly water, we still need to be better about drinking water. So in between meals, drink water. With lunch, maybe dinner. If you want to have a diet soda, what I would tell my patients is, get the small ones, drink half, or drink half of a regular one with lunch, drink half with dinner, or get the smaller ones and have those for lunch and dinner. Something like that, right? Something to make sure you're still meeting other essential requirements, which is water intake, but you're still able to enjoy a diet soda if you enjoy diet soda.
Do you think we're in a health emergency right now? Do you think this is causing a crisis? And who's responsible? If you do, so that's assuming if we are.
Yeah, so if you may have seen this on my channel, I talk about how everybody thinks America is going to be brought down from the outside, it's going to be brought down from the inside. Our healthcare system is teetering on collapse. Teetering. I'm in a group with 100,000 physicians. That's 1/10. That's 10% of all physicians in America. The entire purpose of the group is how do I get out of clinical medicine? 58% of nurses and medical students in a recent survey said they will never see a patient. Yeah, right. That's mind-boggling, mind-boggling.
Okay.
And so, if we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough doctors. We're already in shortages of both. People who are in the profession want to get out, and then people who are in school never want to practice. We
I have
are.
to ask, is there a reason? Like, what are they saying? What's the reason why?
It's just health. You go into it thinking you want to help people, but then you realize you work for a private equity company or a hospital where it's all about the dollars. All right. And you're taking a group of people who are pretty altruistic, and to
Of course.
them they want to spend time with people, they want to help people. But if you're seeing 30, 40, 50 patients a day, I don't care who you are, that's going to burn you out.
Of course.
Right? That's a lot of people, that's a lot of pain, that's a lot of suffering that you have to deal with, that you're trying to help people through. So there's no one person to blame. The blame is all around. It's the government for allowing the proliferation of companies and things that are not in our best interest, right? It's creating a food system that ultra processed foods and high calorie foods are everywhere. It's the physicians who came before us for selling out their practices to private equity groups and hospital groups. The death of the community physician, right? The physician who could really service their community and help people with their health. It's on each and every one of us because you talk to most people, they know it's healthy to exercise. They know it's healthy to eat fruits and vegetables. They know they should be getting sleep. They know they shouldn't be drinking every day. They still do it anyway. So
Right.
there's plenty of blame to go around. There will not be one simple solution to fix this. And it's going to take a lot of time to untangle the mess that we've put ourselves in.
So this is where I'm going to give you my recommendation. One of the most unheralded, underappreciated mediums that could solve a lot of this is music. I don't know if
Mm,
you've read the research on the health benefits. There's some excellent scientists. Daniel Levitin. Are you familiar with him?
mm-mm,
He wrote a book, I want to say about 15 years ago about music. And then he then became a professor at Stanford. And he's just released a new book. Let me get the name of it. Give me a sec here. It's literally using medicine for healing or music for healing. His latest book is called I Heard There Was a Secret Chord.
mm.
Um, And so I think, so there's twofold that I see with this. Not only is music able to help people with healing, but it's also able to help communicate messages. I think we've reached a trough now for artists in terms of saturation with getting music out. And there's no real plan for the vast majority of artists and musicians. And yet the talent is higher than ever because of music education, because of technology allowing people to express themselves musically. I think there's an avenue. I think there's a lane there that we can provide um, doctors like yourself that need that messaging on a mass communication level. So, you know, the frustration I think for people in the know is, how do we get guys like you amplified? You know, your following should literally be 50-fold what it is. I mean, the value you provide, man, I can't tell you how many times I've just like gone down the rabbit hole of your posts. I just read your stuff. You know what I mean? It's just so incredibly valuable, and it's being crowded out by the net negatives, by the food babes, right?
Right.
And then what, like I said, the most disappointing to me is seeing Dr. Callie and Casey Means, defer to Jordan Peterson. I mean, come on, man. Like, here's a guy who's a very complex guy because he's capable of incredibly intelligent, insightful stuff, and then just the most colossally stupid things you could ever imagine. And when it comes to our health, we can't mess with this. We can't have a guy who agreed with his daughter on an all beef, all salt diet now going to the Senate saying, hey, you should listen to these doctors,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. And it's when people stray out of their zone of expertise is when people get into problems. And I can say this as an internal medicine doctor, you have to be good to great at just about everything in medicine because I literally take care of problems from head to toe. There are still certain things that are well outside my area of expertise, and I'll refer people. For example, I had someone come to me today. Their child has Crohn's, and they were asking me about nutrition advice for Crohn's, and I said, that's not my area of expertise. I don't work with people specifically on this. I referred them to a colleague who does,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think more people need to do that. We don't need people whose expertise is in one field talking about something that they have never studied in, they've never seen patients or clients in that field. They are just talking about or regurgitating something else that somebody else said, right?
But, right. I think what makes this complex is it's essentially a free for all.
Mm-hmm.
We've got this platform that allows anyone to say anything they want. And therefore, and these algorithms are designed to addict people. So we've got these attention merchants that have mastered this art of communication. And then we've got real experts, and we've got the complexity of wanting to reach the right people with the right message.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, we have a system that's broken. So I think it starts with just having conversations like this, right? And that's ultimately my goal. I mean, what I try to what my goal is to help the world find out about people like you. This is like a passion project for me,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and this is where music is so much more, or can be so much more powerful, is when it's being used as a medium to help amplify important people. And I'm so glad I was able to meet you. This is the first time actually. Well, I guess it's still virtual, but it's great to commute. You've always been so responsive, and I want to find ways to do that. I want to find ways to get you. And, I happen to have, celebrity friends, of course, and I think that's where celebrities can play a crucial role. But unfortunately, there's a flip side to that, which is they can get in the hands of charlatans too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My last guest was an author of an incredible book on the laws of connection. I said to him that the problem with your book is it's very good and it can be used by anyone. So that's where the role of government, and that's where it gets complicated, and that's where I think you're so unique in this space, because like you said, of your background in pharmacology, you're a pharmacist, you're an MD, and you're an MBA, with a genuine desire to help people. Anyone that goes to your page knows that, right? And so, and I mean, you're doing these big conferences. You'll be here in Vegas in a few months, right?
Yep, I'll be in Vegas in March, so I'll definitely let you know. Would love to meet you in person.
Yeah. So what would you say? How do we help you? Where do we go to scale this message up?
I think it just starts with being curious. That's the most important thing. I was talking to someone today who, people just hear a message on social media and their confirmation bias, they just believe it, right? If it's in line with their worldview, they just believe it. They don't research, they don't question it, they don't critically think on it. So I think just sparking curiosity, having these conversations is really important. Like we talked about, mindset to me is the most important aspect of
I
health.
agree.
If I can
Totally.
just get you to see something just from a slightly different perspective, that could unlock everything. And so it's figuring out what message and how do I do that with as many people as possible. Just kind of get them to challenge their assumptions a little bit.
And maybe make it exciting. It's interesting, man. I'm totally gonna say this out loud, and of course, it's not nothing. But man, my dream has to come up with a nootropic
Hmm.
and find a replacement for alcohol, because I know the ill effects of alcohol, but like so many things, it's because there's a trade off. I'm also not opposed to alcohol entirely because it's got great pluses too, right? So, can we create some type of supplement that sort of bridges the two? It's healthy, um, but at the same time has some of the positive effects of alcohol. And then there could be a whole line of nootropics that are specifically intended for certain things. Have you ever thought about things like that, making it exciting for people? And maybe we need these elevated states to help us get there too, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with occasional use of alcohol, right? When it's done responsibly. In fact, most people who know me know I'm not opposed to just about any drug when used in the correct and responsible situation. Humans have been using drugs and performance enhancers and mood
Right.
enhancers since we've basically been humans, right? It's
Yes.
never going to stop, right?
The,
It's
the
just,
there's a book, Scarcity Brain. I don't know if you've heard of it.
hmm,
Amazing book
yep,
by Michael Easter. I
yep,
love his take on that. Have you read the book?
I have.
Yeah, and basically, like, I'm trying to remember how he put it, but almost like we're designed that way to work with these things.
Yeah, it's not going to go away. It's just how do you do it safely, making sure that that the supplies aren't tainted, people have resources, and then how you use them, right? I always tell people never drink when you're depressed or you're down. That's a recipe for disaster. You will
Right.
never catch me with a drink in my hand if I have a bad day, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I only drink like to celebrate or have a good time or because I actually like the taste of certain things. Like over
Right.
the weekend, I had two old fashions with a friend I hadn't seen in a while, right?
Sure.
And we were celebrating the fact that I had my big talk, right?
Yeah, I
And
saw the pictures, man. Looked awesome.
it was great. But I might not drink again for another 2 or 3 months,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the
right?
same way now. I rarely drink.
Yeah. And if I do, it's one or two. It's not 10, it's not a bunch of shots
Mm-hmm.
and or things like that, right? So it's figuring out a way that we can help people better control these things and then provide them in a safer environment because you're never going to get rid of them.
Right. Right. So, do you see a future where we can combine, good pharmacology, um, and I guess cultural norms? Because, it's funny how that works, right? In our society, alcohol is legal and accepted, even though it's led to the death of, millions, whereas other drugs have this very negative connotation. But, it's starting to change, like you said, like MDMA,
Mm-hmm.
psilocybin, recently ketamine, I think. Um,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these. Here I am a DJ. Believe it or not, man, I haven't tried. I never used cocaine in my life. I'm just what can I say? I don't have that addiction gene. I don't
Mm-hmm.
find, but I have found MDMA helpful. I've
Mm.
done it on occasion, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I think that, like you said, we need to move society towards these things, and then ultimately, how, you know, I didn't mean to be so um, forceful with bringing up these influencer types, but I really think it's important. I really think we need to keep influencers out of this space unless they have a medical background.
Right.
And I don't think Food Babe should be allowed. And she's got this massive following, and I don't think she should be allowed to do what she does. And there is some good to what she's doing, and that's the
Right.
flip side of it. Is she has brought attention to important issues, but it's come at a tremendous cost, right?
Right. And the
And
thing
that's
is, she can't be held accountable, right? I have a license.
right,
If I go and say a bunch of crazy stuff and people get hurt, I can get sued. I can lose my license. I lose the ability to feed my family, right? So I'm going to be
right,
very careful and very thoughtful about what I say online. But these
right,
influencers who aren't licensed, who can just come up and say anything, they right now cannot be held accountable if they hurt somebody,
right.
which I think is a travesty.
I agree. I agree, and I love and I want to see guys like you partner with artists to communicate this message. And I want to see, just do Dr. Ben Rain?
Mm-mm.
He's a big. He was a professor at Stanford, young guy. He really pushes back on bad information online, and that's just something you just don't see scientists, because it's just generally not fun, right? To go and fight people online and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something
Mm-hmm.
I've always wrestled with in my head. Like, I've just seen such bad information by so-called experts, and I'm a DJ, so who am I? Who should I be do? But this person is not qualified either, and yet they have this massive following, and it's almost always because they're very good at communicating a polarizing message.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so, it's interesting. I don't know how to call you're I like you're a very human guy, right? Like, I don't know what to call it, venting on your stories, or there's a couple times you've you're a very humanized guy, which I think is great. You do have a very everyman ness about you, which I think is great. And you seem like the average guy, except you're not. You're actually an expert. And I think that's a powerful trait, because I do think a lot of doctors, uh, they can come off as elitist, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we
Mm-hmm.
live in a time where that's just not. And I even appreciate why, right? We really should be appreciating and revering doctors. You guys have a vast uh, education that vastly exceeds the average person. You know, and I think that should be appreciated. And we live in a time where people don't appreciate that like they should. Everybody's a armchair expert, but at the same time, we're in a system, like you said, where the best, most altruistic doctors are literally incentivized to leave. So,
Right. It's a tough situation, and I think you're right. A lot of my colleagues can be very prickly. I never forget where I came from,
mhm,
and I never forget that I'm not a title. I'm a person. I'm not a physician. I'm not a doctor per se. I'm just a guy who has a subject matter expertise and just wants to help people based upon my subject matter expertise. Right?
right.
It's not.
That-
It's not. I know best. A lot of times, like I'll give you a story. Like I had a friend come to me recently, and he's been seeing a whole bunch of doctors trying to figure something out. Couldn't figure it out. It's been dealing with this for months, right? And so he was like, "Can you help me?" I was like, "Sure." So I just started asking him a ton of questions, emails, texts, back and forth, asking him questions about the situation. And then I was like, okay, well, send me everything that everybody else has done. I looked through that, pointed to something, found something in the imaging that correlated with his symptoms, and put together a plan for him that all these other specialists and doctor, all these imaging, like no one had pointed that out to him. And it's really just because I was curious and I just asked them a whole bunch of questions. And because, the way I've set up and how I do things, I have the time to do that and the time to noodle and think about it. And so to me, it wasn't like I'm the physician, I know best. Those other doctors were idiots. It was just, I'm curious. Let me dig into this. Let me dig into your story and figure out, like, okay, let me see if I can see something from a different angle,
Hmm.
that no one else saw. And so that's the way I approach health. But like, it's a two-way street. I've got to have information from my patient, right? I've got to
And they have
build
to be
trust.
willing to take on the lifestyle changes. I think, like I said, seeing that post you made a few weeks ago about that, that's got to be a shift in your profession.
Yeah, you have
Because
to hold people accountable, right? You can't be the lollipop physician who's like, oh, that's okay, you don't exercise, that's okay, you don't want to eat. You can't do that. You have to hold people accountable. It's like, listen, you came to me, you told me your goals. I'm going to help you achieve those goals. I'm also going to hold you accountable. And don't expect me to work magic if you're not doing your part, right? There's no other thing that you can do in the world where you can go to someone and they just give you everything continuously without you having to put in any work whatsoever,
exactly.
right? I'm not Jesus, right?
And that,
Like,
and that, and but
he
that
gave you
became
everything without
profitable.
any of your own work, but everything else you have to put in your own work.
I think what it's literally just become more profitable to do that. We've now shifted our society to the point where we say, where can we profit the most? And in this case, it's keeping people. I mean, you look at like people on diets. We're on roller coaster yo-yo diets. Why? Because it's more profitable to keep people going, right? And I think that's part of the issue. And so these are fundamental shifts that we just have to have conversations like we're doing right now, you know.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think I want to connect you with some people. I think that would be really cool. I did my one of the best books I've ever read, and I think you'd love this book. It's by a doctor who, are you ready for this? He was a college football star, everything, and literally just became an MD, and then came up with these absolutely mysterious symptoms. Nobody could figure out what he was dying from, and he almost died not once, not twice, but 5 times. Five.
Mm,
Cured himself, figured out what he had, and then now has dedicated his life. And this is how he saved himself, was by repurposing an old drug.
mm,
And it was a rare form of Castleman's disease.
mm-hmm,
And then it dawned on him, how many thousands of drugs are sitting on shelves that have the potential to be repurposed.
mm-hmm,
There's
mm-hmm.
just no profit incentive in that. So he's now dedicated his life to this foundation. It's a great book too. So
Yeah, that's amazing.
um, yeah, if I would love, I'm really working to figure out ways to amplify, even like, because this is a big part of what I want to do is work with doc. If I have a way to put you guys together, man, life goals made. I think
Mm-hmm.
you guys would probably get along really well, and do the world some good in ways that I can't even think of. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
it's all about collaboration. I'm all about that.
yeah, yeah, man. Let's keep the conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really enjoyed this, man. I learned a lot, and I think we're very aligned. I think there's so much more we can get out of this that goes beyond just a podcast. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about as well. But
Yeah, definitely.
I really appreciate having you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And
Check out, follow. What's your social media so everybody knows?
oh yeah, Dr. Harris MD on Instagram, and it's Dr. Harris MD PharmD on TikTok. It's Dr. Richard Harris MD on YouTube.
And you're a pharmacist or a pharmacologist?
I'm a pharmacist, so I'm actually a licensed pharmacist.
What a combo for supplements. I mean, is there anyone in this country that would be more qualified than you to give
My
this
friend
kind of
Dr.
advice?
Tyler Pansner, he's a PhD, in molecular pharmacology. He's a super sharp guy. So we have talks. We have really deep talks about pharmacology and supplements all the time.
Honestly, man, I would love to go. Can you recommend some books?
Ooh, I've never actually read a book on like pharmacology.
Really? Trying to get this
Yeah,
thing.
that was like written by like for the public. That's a good question. Now you've got me curious. I'm gonna have to look into that to see if there is something out there. There probably is on like pharmacogenetics. That's a really interesting field where you're looking at how genetically we metabolize things differently, and like
Right.
how
I
how
just
you
bought a.
dose
Have you
that
ever heard of
stuff.
Alter DNA? They want to sponsor me, so they'll
Yeah.
take your DNA and then they'll map out a plan for you.
Yep. Yep. That's kind of the next wave of things. AI is going to really help that out to like
Yes.
personalize medication recommendations. So you do a swab, you know your genome like forever. And then if you ever have to go on a medication, you can predict, okay, which one may be better, which one more side effects, which dosing might be more appropriate to start
Incredible.
off with,
Incredible.
what supplements may be more beneficial. There'll still be some fine tuning there, but it gives you some really good starting gate information.
Awesome. I love it, man. We got to keep this conversation going. Thank you
Yeah,
so
man.
much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.